Our final session for today, what is the future of the literary novel? We have authors Manu Joseph, K.R. Meera, and Pierre Ducrozet discussing survival strategies for the literary novel with Minnie Kapoor, the Hindu's Ideas editor. As you may have noticed, there's been a slight change in the session. We're missing American author Heidi Julavits, who has been hospitalized due to a medical emergency, but the session will proceed as I mentioned earlier. So please join me in welcoming all four of them onto stage with a huge round of applause.
One of our panelists unfortunately can't make it, so we will miss her. But we're going to discuss the topic is survival strategies for the literary novel. It's the literary novel is supposedly supposed to be in a state of crisis, but I'll hear from my panelists whether this is a necessary condition of the literary novel, to always be in a state of crisis, to always be fighting for its survival, to always have to reimagine itself. Because in 1960, somebody said that the special fate of the novel, considered as a genre, is to be always dying. I think maybe Pierre could talk about his own writing and how he's trying to reimagine the form, as it were.
Hey. Okay. Hello to everybody. Yeah, so I tried in my last novel, which is the fourth, which I can show you after. It's only in French. I mean, it's not in English for the moment. Hope so, maybe one day. And it's a novel about the contemporary world. I mean, it's happening right now in Mexico, in the States, in the Silicon Valley, and it's in this novel I try to invent or to search for a literature form who could fit with the world we all experiment or live. Yeah, the question was why in Europe, at least, do we still use the patterns, the literary patterns of the 19th century, when the world has totally changed? And why don't we try to reinvent the form according to the world we're living, which is a fragmented world, which is a networked world, which is really different. I mean, Flaubert, for example, or Stendhal, made like this perfect form, which is basically going from a point A to a point B, and which correspond to a model of democracy, which is totally ineffective now. So yeah, as my subject is this world and is internet and is well, different things, I try to make this narrative like which is moving from a point to another, which has no beginning, no ending, which has no low or up, which is like experimenting himself and moving constantly. I like this novel, you know, where you go from a genre to a style to another, to a character to another, like constantly moving like this. And yeah, that's the first try. So you know, when you're surfing on internet, basically you're doing that. You're in Mumbai, and then in one moment you're in Paris or in Prehistory or in, I don't know, the color red. I mean, it's a small idea of infinite internet. It's something that we are always afraid of, but infinite is like has with this network like a small interpretation, but some idea of that this network is working. So yeah. I'm just gonna begin with that. So I have this dream about a new form who could fit with the 21st century.
Manu, if I could ask you, actually, is the literary novel actually in crisis? I mean, is the question valid?
Yeah, just look at this hall, I think, So I was wondering if some film star is talking in some other venue, or then I saw that there is a session called The Nude, but then I saw it's just poems. So I'm sure there are very good reasons why there are not enough people here. I hope it is not the idea of literary novel, but if it is, I wouldn't be so surprised. What has happened is that the terminology itself, literary novel, has become a warning for a majority of readers, not all the readers, for a majority of readers. They have been systemically, for a long period of time, I believe, that readers have tried to grapple with these highly acclaimed books, and they have not enjoyed them. They have been introduced to books through award juries, and they've read these books, and they feel that they should read these books, but they've not enjoyed them. They've read glowing reviews of books, and when they read the books themselves, they're not able to connect. Majority of readers, I'm not talking about most of you. So I think that there is a sense of disappointment, in fact a warning, that a literary novel might bore them, and a literary novel is a masquerade for sociology and activism and a lot of other things, which it is not, and maybe it should not be. And actually, to be honest, I agree with most of the readers. 90% of the literary novel are kind of. But in the heart of a literary novel is a most fascinating thing, which is the story. And the story, by its definition, is something which is very, very interesting and convincing and interesting. I feel that maybe it's a very controversial suggestion that I have. It seems to annoy some writers, that maybe people who believe they are literary novelists, maybe they also should work harder to reach out. Is there a way to reach out without compromising what you are trying to do? Is there a way to reach out to readers without compromising your message and your authenticity? Is reaching out always a corrupt thing which only filmmakers, commercial filmmakers, or commercial storytellers should do? What if I argue that reaching out in art is a form of humility? It is not a corrupt thing, where you have a message or you have a sentiment, you have a particular reason why you're writing a book, and then you find the mediums which can be used. For example, the story itself. What is a story? A story can be an ideas delivery device. That's what a story can be. I feel that sometimes we are not pushed enough to work hard on our plots. We are not pushed enough to work hard on our stories because we feel that we are writing for a specific reason. Like, oh, I want to just convey anger. I just want to convey a sense of loss. And then what happens in a commercial setup is that then you are forced to package this important message in a story that is very appealing. You are forced to reach out. Maybe
just to take off from where Manu finished, Meera, at the heart of your novel, in Malayalam, Arachar, and in English, Hangwoman, everybody loves a good hanging. It's driven by a very powerful story. And just to, I must mention that in Malayalam, Meera's novel has sold in excess of 150,000 copies. So, I mean, people are reading, people are buying books. They're drawn by the power of the story. But Meera, your book was highly acclaimed in Malayalam, sold bestseller. It was translated into English, highly acclaimed. Is there a difference in the way you've reached out, or readers have reached out to you across languages?
First of all, I want to disagree with Manu Joseph, because he is the one who disagrees with everyone, no? In all the panels. So I want to disagree with him because he was talking about this hall and the poor participation, I think. But I think that it is because the literary novel is not dying at all that so many people haven't come here. Because they know very well that it's not dying at all. And it won't die at all. That's why we see some chairs unoccupied. And I'm reminded of Kamala Suraya, the writer in Malayalam, who said that writers always will be talking to empty chairs because the listeners will come much later. This is very true about literary novels too. From my experience, my novel, when Arachar, when it was finished, it was serialized in a Malayalam weekly first. In Malayalam, we have this, we publish, some of the novels are published as a series in some of the literary magazines. And when it was serialized, the major publisher in Malayalam, DC Books, wanted to publish it as a book. And when he suggested that he will print 5,000 copies for the first edition, I was really enraged. I was shocked. I told my husband, no, I'm not going to allow this, because 5,000 copies means such a big book and such a gloomy book, and nobody is going to buy it. And so the book will be in their godowns for so many years. So I'm not going to. I only wanted them to print 1,000 or 2,000 copies as the first edition, because otherwise, no, I was afraid that it is going to be kept unsold. But actually what happened was the 5,000 copies were sold out in less than 2-3 months. And at that time, just before that, there was kind of, everyone was complaining that reading habit is dying. There's no hope for reading in Malayalam. Everyone, the new generation is drifting away from reading and all. Especially then there was another complaint that novel was dying, literary novel as a genre was dying. But when my novel was published, some of my contemporary writers, young writers, they were all publishing novels. We were all writing short fiction before that, but once we started writing novels, we could easily attract readers back to the literary novels, and ever since, I see the bestseller charts topped by literary novels. So I won't buy the argument that literary novel is dying. It might be true that a literary novel, a particular novel, is not selling as much as a dictionary or kind of an autobiography for a limited time. But the popularity or the reception a literary novel enjoys will be for a long term, I think. So the future, the readers will come much later. The books will be lying, waiting for them.
Maybe we could turn around the question. Maybe the literary novel is not dying because of numbers. It is selling. But is the literary novel today not ambitious enough? Like Pierre, you spoke about, trying to capture the seamlessness of the internet, for instance, in your writing. It's something Julio Cortázar did ages ago, where he anticipated hypertext. In India, we had Salman Rushdie with Midnight's Children. He changed the way we spoke. They reached beyond their genre, beyond their field, and influenced life. And of course, Marquez influenced filmmaking, etc. So, is there a lack of ambition, or is it a cluelessness? There definitely is a crisis in that sense.
Yeah, there's a lack of ambition. Yeah, clearly. Yeah, there is like conformism, and you don't have just to tell a story. Tell a story can. I mean, like Céline said, you have stories, and you just have to open the newspaper, and you have all the story of the world. It's how you tell it, and in this way you have to invent constantly. Like I know when James Joyce comes, well, he invents a totally new way, and that corresponds. I mean, it's a moment. It's a precise moment in the history. And we forget that. I mean, we just, telling the story like always. That's great. We have to tell stories, but how? And yeah, what we said before, fiction is absolutely not in crisis. We are like eating fiction all the time. I mean, like maybe never. We all the time in the movies, and we're watching. I mean, these incredible TV series, and so fiction is absolutely not in crisis. We need fiction to understand the world. Otherwise, the world is like has no sense, has no shape. He's shapeless. Fiction help us to understand and to put a shape in this shapeless nonsense reality, because it's like it's what it is. Okay, so but how do we tell that? I don't know. I don't have the answer, but we have to at least ask ourselves constantly, and not because it's so easy to fall always, you know, in these topics, in these cliches. So to how I'm telling about France or about Europe, what I know the most. And I mean, in France, during years, we're just we had this intimate literature, and we looking at ourselves and our families and our inside. Okay, that's good, but enough now. And that's what's happening. Like in the last years, 10 years, French literature is opening again, and watching the world, and yeah, watching people outside. And that's what we have to do. So mix with journalism, to mix with the other art. We have to look at everything, and the novel has this capacity of absorbing and from everywhere. So that's the power of novel. It's like capitalism in a way. It eats everything which is against him, and at the end it grows like this. A novel is very flexible, and that's a strength.
Would you agree, Manu, that there's a lack of ambition or well, I wouldn't say imagination, because you're always telling a good story. I'll put this question to you in the context of Indian writing, Indian fiction. Is there a sense with our commercial writers selling 1 million copies and in excess that literary novelists are sort of moving away? You know, so they're letting a lot of matter remain outside of their purview. You know, we're in an ivory tower, so we're literary novelists. I'm exaggerating, of course.
No, I think at this point we may have to define a literary novel, which is, I know it sounds like a very tiresome exercise. What is a literary novel? I remember 2 years ago I had a spat with someone on a panel in Bangalore. I think he was on substance, but that's a different issue. I just said that we're not sure, and it's an ambiguous thing. All we know is writers saying this is not a literary novel, that is not a literary novel. Chetan Navagat, of course, is not a literary. This guy is not literary. Nobody knows, though they are in the profession of words. There is no literary expression of what are you talking about. And actually what they want to say is a good novel. We're a very good novel. I've written a very good novel. It has not sold. And that seems to, but then I think maybe it'd be a good idea for you. I think everybody can have their own definition of what is a literary novel. But if you define it, maybe I can respond to it, and we can talk about what are we, maybe we'll get a sense of what we're talking about.
I think at its basic level, a literary novel is something that's open to multiple readings. It is not just a straight, well, a literary novel can also be a straight narrative, but I think open to multiple readings, something lasting. These are all meaningless terms, but something we can go back to on a second reading and find that it still changes the way we look at a particular thing. I don't know.
Different levels of understanding, no?
Maybe different levels or different ways, which leaves it open to interpretation. Unlike, say, well, even suspense novels can be very literary. Crime fiction can be very literary, but I'll use a really dumb word, meaning.
No, but so I think so we can't. So maybe it doesn't even exist.
Isn't that
maybe
the
idea itself doesn't. Like I've read Matilda again, okay, along with my daughter. Okay, I can read Matilda maybe another 5 years later. I can reread these books. Maybe there are just good books and bad books, and there are some good books which can be dense, which expects you to, just like boiled vegetables are good for you, and it's not as easy to eat as junk food. And maybe there are excellent, enjoyable junk novels, and there are novels that are not easy to read or not that easy to read, but they could also be easy to read, which expect something from you also, you know. But there is, in terms of one of the practical reasons why what are called, I'm not going to call them literary novels now. I'm just going to call them good books, quality books. It's a quality books. Okay. Though some of the quality books are also quite dreary, but that's a different thing. That's a different issue altogether. Now, I know that one of the problems in promoting the quality novel is that every book is not a product. It is a product line. It is almost like selling another human being, because you can't say this novel is a bit like that and a bit like this. You can say that with a spy novel. The spy novel is a spy novel. You have a fair idea of what to expect. A mystery novel you can expect. A trashy airport trash, you know what to expect. But here you can't say what it is, and that is the difficulty in selling what is called the quality novel. It is dependent on the author. You have to buy the writer, and these are all extremely difficult things in today's age to promote. And I feel that there is, in terms of, I mean, this is a completely unrelated point. I also want, because we're talking about art, I want to discuss something which is in the heart of the quality novel, which is also probably corrupt, which is the idea of relatability itself. What a reader is most moved by in a quality novel is how much he or she can relate with the characters. And I feel that that pressure that writers have on themselves to talk about things that people relate to is not as pure, probably, as it is made out to be. Even that is a kind of a quasi-commercial reaching out. So I think that authors also probably willfully avoid very, very interesting concepts which people can't relate to, which are great, dense ideas. So I feel that literature, at the end of the day, literature is probably a kind of selfie, and that's an argument which I've frequently made, that people have defamed the selfie. Oh, look at how they're standing and taking their own picture. Sometimes when I'm writing, I feel I'm taking a selfie of myself. This is just a more sophisticated form of selfie, because I'm only projecting myself. And by the way, you don't have to have a smug smile, dear reader, because when you're reading, I think the act of reading too is a form of selfie, because you're always looking for your stories in my stories.
Meera, just to ask you again, taking off from where Manu's left off, is it also a problem, at least here in India, and I know both of you have overcome it, tried to overcome it, or actually overcome it in your novels, that we're not reflecting, I wouldn't say the reality around us, but the concerns, the confusions, the politics. You know, novels are, as Manu said, selfies. They're not addressing vital issues. And you know, I mean, I'll just take the example of Margaret Atwood's *Handmaid's Tale*. She wrote it all these decades ago, but when Trump came to power, it captured. It's very visceral. It captures fears. We're not capturing the fears around us. Would that be valid?
Yeah, somewhat. I can describe why I want to write a novel, because I think it is the best medium to document the kind of life we have around us. That I can, through my life or my observations, or through the lives of some other characters, the universal truth around us, the political, social, economic, everything around us. And what helps us when we talk through the medium of a novel, especially a literary one, is that you can easily combine the kind of imagination, creativity, and the reality to produce a super real or surreal thing. No, I think some of the non-fiction books to have this quality of attracting or capturing the readers, they also want to go back to such books because they provide the pleasure of reading fiction. I don't think mankind can exist without the pleasure of reading fiction. Fiction is something, a basic need for human life. So you want to hear a story, whether it is, and you want to think that it is real. It need not be real, but you have to feel, someone should make believe that it is real. And this need to hear a real story, knowing very well that it cannot be truly real, is what drives people to reading, I think. So you can't replace the pleasure of fiction or reading fiction at all. So you have to go back to the novel writing again and again.
Yeah, I just want to say I totally agree with what Manu says. It has no definition, and that's precisely the beauty and the power of the novel. It has no definition. It constantly adapts and moves, and that's why it in the history of literature the novel succeeded so much, because it's constantly in evolution, and when it doesn't move, it just dies.
Can I just say I find it strange that this session is happening, because it seems like literary fiction in India, English language fiction, is far healthier than it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So I'm just wondering why you're even having this.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you're right. More people are reading, not just important people, and more people are writing, and there is a lot of there's a different kind of stuff which is coming out. But I think writers want to crib. That is the nature of people who are artists. I think they enjoy whipping themselves. Or maybe there is a sense that they are not as central. They may be read now. They're not as central as other kinds of artists are. They're not mainstream. And there's a feeling that people who write quality books, they feel that they are not as known as other kinds of writers who don't seem to have any plot or other kind of things which they think is important. But I feel it's okay. I think mainstream is overrated, and the problem is not with the literary novel. The problem is with a misunderstanding of mainstream. The mainstream is a lottery. There is a slot for a certain form of expression, and anybody who comes at a particular time will occupy that slot. I think what is important and what is fascinating and what young writers should realize, because it's a horrible thing to be a bitter middle-aged person. It's always better for an artist not to be bitter, though bitter can be a bit useful also. Is that the niche is what matters. A book is a projection of your personality. If you're not going to have 1 million lovers, I wonder, why do you want 10 million readers? Maybe if you have great 100,000 readers who can get what you're saying, that's good enough. And if you are a greedy person, I feel that it's all right. There's nothing wrong in being greedy. Then you have to look at other projections of your story. Like, for example, can it be a TV series? Can you just be a showrunner who can just nudge people into making movies from your stories? Can mini-series be created from your novels? I think that is one way of being ambitious, instead of saying that I want everybody who reads Chetan Bhagat to also read me. I think that's foolish.
As a layman, the question is, what what role does, if I remove fiction from novel, does it offer any other opportunity in the canon of literature?
I think we're assuming that novel is fiction.
Does the medium of novel itself, as it's not poetry or it's not, is there anything else other than fiction in a novel?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. There's nothing readable without fiction.
This question.
I think I understood that. Sorry, the nature of your question. It's like, is a novel only about fiction? Is a novel only about making up things? In fact, as a journalist who writes novels, sometimes I've wondered why am I making up stuff, or why am I telling people when it's all this is true that I've only fabricated it? What happens in a novel if you take off fiction is that there are I do feel that literature's claim that its anthropology is overrated, it's overestimated, but the novel can be very accurate about many other things. Without fiction, you have no excuse to say a few things about human nature. Where will you say it? You can only say it probably in poetry. There is a whole spectrum of human nature you can't even mention in journalism. There is a whole spectrum of human behavior. For example, love and very complexities of love. You can't even discuss it in journalism, or it needs a good excuse to discuss. And these are the things that fiction offers. There is no other medium except for poetry which can offer this kind of a discussion. And also, you can, as a reader, you can enjoy topics that you would not be interested in as topics. For example, when you read non-fiction, you choose the topic. Now, you may say that I'm not interested in reading about some town in South America, but that's exactly what you do when you read Marquez. So you read subjects that you're not interested in because you read it for the story.
Yeah, to answer your question, in my last novel, or my two last, I mix like reality and fiction, and I think it's a good way to you don't know where you are in reality in fiction, and it helps you to understand a lot of things. I mean, when you, I don't know, I read a lot of things about Mexico, about ISIS, okay, but I don't really understand if I'm not in the scene, in the fiction. So fiction helps you to understand everything, but I mean, in some fiction, everything can be true, but in reality, nothing. I mean, can be everything made up, but in reality, you are in the truth, thanks to the fiction. So yeah, if you can mix both, that's helpful to understand things too.
Any other questions?
Yeah. I think Manu sir briefly discussed this before, but like as a young reader and as a student of literature, I am reminded many times why I have to read these kind of literary novels that aren't necessarily enjoyable, but hopefully maybe 10 years down the lane, I look back and realize that the value of these books and what they tell. But according to you, why do we really have to read these novels? I've heard like many answers, but I'd just like to know from you. Yeah.
You know, you don't have to, and you shouldn't. You know, I feel that that is the thing. So the establishment creates this idea that these are important books, and most of us, if you're not confident about your own intellectuality, you pursue with the book. You torture yourself for 60 pages, 100 pages. Your mind is drifting. It's not. I feel it's all right. Yeah, it is also subjective. The books that I feel have really moved me, or I've enjoyed even, maybe you wouldn't, you know. So I feel, in fact, I'm going to campaign. Maybe I'll be the only writer in the world to campaign. Give up books. Don't waste too much time if it's not holding at it. See, when I was a literature student, there was a big mistake I made, because I used to read a lot before I did literature. Then I was reading all kind of Francis Bacon and kind of shit, which I didn't want to read. But I wanted to, like Ulysses by James Joyce was supposed to be this book that you should read. And I'm a 17-year-old boy who said, I'm going to read this book, then I'll be a better writer. I couldn't get past 5 pages. So I thought something is wrong with me. I waited 5 years. I said, okay, I'll give this guy I couldn't, every 5 years, I'm not exaggerating, every 5 years, I give Ulysses a shot. And I still can't get past the first 5 or 10 pages because I just find it very unremarkable. But it is still a highly acclaimed book, so I'm very confident there is something about it which some people get. But I feel that we should not blame ourselves for the failure of a book.
Maybe Garcia Marquez is a good example for that. It's the best literature you can make, and it's the most enjoyable literature you can read. It has to be both. I mean, the best literature should not be so boring that you can't read Ulysses. And Garcia Marquez is a good example. It's like you're just having a lot of fun, a lot of pleasure, and that's the best literature you can make too. So yeah, I think both things.
I think this is the most important point. You know just because something is important, it doesn't mean it has to be boring. And I think the real craft of an artist is in not only expressing what is important to you, but to also be engaging and entertaining. And why is entertainment such a maligned word in serious art? I never understood. Entertainment is such a serious thing in itself.
Pleasure is very crucial, important.
Last but not least, I will say that without story, I am going back to the same point. Without story, no poem, no short fiction, no autobiography, no biography, not even a new story exists. There should be a story. There should be a story. Without story, we don't exist at all.
Well, I guess we could have gone on, and I think maybe at the next Lit Fest we should have the same subject tackled by readers and have the writers listen in, because as we said, a literary novel or a good novel is something you can go back to again and again, and the reader's interpretation is so vital in a literary novel. But, the reader can take away things that the writer never intended. So that's just food for thought. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'll have a quick question. Yeah, sorry. As a first-time author, I have written a book that blends travel, art, and about art around the world with a social message. So I focused at art as a therapy and how it can help a person to actually recover during crisis time. So I am a first-time author, and I would like to get some suggestions of, how do I spread this message through a book?
How does she spread the message? She's a first-time author, if I got you right.
Yes.
And how do you spread the message in the book?
Yeah, spread the message, a social message through the books.
Very discreetly, very like you shouldn't see it. It should be between the lines,
Lines.
Hemingway always, write like this. You don't have to say things. You just have to show things, and you don't have to say almost anything. It should be between the lines. Which is blank.
See, why do we write? We write because we want to tell something. What do we want to tell? The truth. Why do we read? Because we want to listen to the truth, not something, not anything. So truths, being true to yourself is the basic thing of a novel, which will spread the message, if there is any.
I have taken the topic of art for therapy, meaning there are many people who are undergoing illness and trying to recover from health issues, and also like for mental health. Okay, so that's the main point. So I am a first-time author, and I am from a non-literature background, but I am very fond of reading and I have a taste. So do you have any suggestion for non-literature people experimenting with books?
I think most writers would not have a literature background. I don't think that's, if I'm correct, that's not essential.
I also want to, I completely agree with Pierre. In fact, I would say that the social message, a novel is not about social message. I think only social message, only social commentary is about social commentary. And this social message thing is a journalistic bullshit, which has been promoted because when you are talking about a novel, reviewers need to hang on to something which seems important. And everything else about the novel is too abstract to review, to talk about in detail. So there is a disproportionate concentration on what emerges as social message, and young writers should not be trapped by this misconception of a novel that some kind of social message is crucial to it. You know, yes, it is, but there is a lot of things that the readers will get as long as your characters are real.
Yeah, the novel with message are the bad ones, actually, mostly. You just have to create like energies, powers, dentro the in the novel, which has the characters mostly, and then let it just flow and go, and you will see what happens. Maybe the contrary what you're thinking, but it doesn't matter. Let the power of the characters just.
So my question is about. I'll keep it short and sweet. So essentially, whenever, I mean, we are all bilingual. We Indians, we all speak English and some other language as our mother tongue. I mean, so whenever I read something in my mother tongue, which is Malayalam, so I find it. I mean, though I've been studying in an English medium school, though I've been acquainted with the English language for quite some time, I find that reading something in my mother tongue actually has a better. I feel an instant connect to the novel immediately. So I find, I mean, I don't know, I wanted your opinion on whether promoting literary novels in Indian languages, would it have a better option, or would it have a better effect on drawing the younger generation? I mean, at least in Kerala, I know that the younger generation is very updated on contemporary literature, but as far as the other states, I'm not very well informed. So I don't know. I just wanted your thoughts on this. Thank you.
Meera, would you like to?
It's kind of, it needs an elaborate detailing many things. I would say that without knowing Indian languages, we don't understand what the Indian experience is. We are talking about nationalism a lot. In fact, there was an excellent session just before this. And without connecting to people talking other languages, we don't understand the kind of lives they have, the kind of nature they live in, and the kind of knowledge, the knowledge about various aspects of life we have. And in India, I think the Indian experience comes from the regional languages only. Without knowing the regional language, without reading the regional literature, there is no Indianness at all. Even the people writing in Indian languages, English, belong to other states, but they have this specific regional experience which they are recreating in English. Then only this genre called Indian writing exists. This is my observation on this.
So when we talk about Indianness or about a nationality coming into existence through literature or books, I think fiction is one element that does not need a nationality to come into force. But literature is just not fiction, although it's very important because of its imagination. How do you think one can still write a very effective novel for generations to come, which is not fiction, which does not include the nationality or the credence of a person, from where he comes or from where he belongs?
That's exactly the purpose of the novel. You have to, I mean, not knowing the nationality or the people where he's from. If you achieve that, maybe you won. I mean, the novel must be doesn't recognize borders or limitation, or as I said before, he has no nationality. The novelist, I think so. I hope so.
No, why do you want to hide the nationality? What is there to be ashamed of? Like, for example, the way I approach. I was in a specific Indian context. Like, for example, when I derive a lot not from language but Indian facial expressions. Like, for example, the way men stand on the road and look at women, for example. That's unique to India. So capturing that is part of a novel, and it's important because Americans don't do it that way. Like for example, in Chennai when I was growing up, one uncle will come and he'll appear that he's clearing his throat, but he's saying Garbachao. And the other uncle will also clear his throat, and they have conveyed a political analysis of something that they read in the newspaper. To an outsider, they're only clearing the throat, and they have actually said one word, probably, you know. And similarly, many kinds of behavior, Indian behavior, can also be captured. So in fact, you can, instead of being anonymous, you can get really local. I think what you're talking about is now, for example, can an Indian write about the brain, a scientific non-fiction about the brain, and will it be as accepted as an American writing the same?
No, maybe you are talking that in spite of nationalism or even outside nationalism, there is a story for all the human beings. No, and it should be communicated or it should be expressed, and it should be kind of available to. Yeah, it's true, because I have read that there are only 7 basic emotions for the whole human world, no? And there are about 32 or 33 permutations and combinations possible of these emotions. All the stories all over the world, through all the centuries, had been told using these permutations, combinations, no? So everywhere, if you fall in love in any part of the world, there are only limited options for the story, how it will end. But where do we make it different? How do we make it different? Why does Anna Karenina talk to us even after so many centuries?
Yes.
So my observation as a reader is that a novel remains, or novel kind of tests the challenge of the time when it has something to say even after the main story is taken out of it. There is something which you can take from it. Okay, the novel will answer the test of the time.
So it should be both very local and universal, like both things.
I don't think you can plan these things, but thank you very much.